Hey YouTubers, this is the GSTV viewer coming at you with my second season retrospective look on the hit sci-fi TV show So Weird. This is a continuation of season 1 as part of my GSTV Obscurities chronology. Now, season 2 of So Weird was around the time where the show started to hit its stride in terms of storytelling and characterization. Now, season 2 opens up with an episode entitled Medium. And in this episode, Fee and her family return home in Hope Springs, Colorado. She attends this sort of group meeting, which is called a seance, where she contacts this medium known to have the ability to communicate telepathically with the spirits of the dead. So while the seance is in progress, little did she realize that one of the people that was involved in the seance is actually an FBI agent undercover. So he tracks down that the medium turns out to be a fraud that couldn't really perform such a duty. So when Fee ends up tracking down the FBI agent, it turns out that he is in fact a legit medium who used to perform such an ability to his patients. But a certain devastating turns of events caused him to quit his duty as a medium. So ever since then, the agent's just been kind of distancing himself from having this sort of ability that not a lot of people realized, like outside of his patients, that is. Fee ends up finding out that the FBI agent does have that ability to communicate telepathically with the dead. So she asks the agent if she could come over to the house and make an attempt to requests a favor to contact her father. So after some convincing, however, the FBI agent takes under her consideration and they both agree to meet up at her place. Now, I thought this episode was actually a really good way to kick off a season opener. Fiona becomes a lot more determined and even more interested in the paranormal. She books a medium to help her communicate with the spirits of the dead, and particularly her father Rick, who died when she was a little baby. Interesting enough is that Fiona didn't really have as much musical background compared to her parents, as stated in the line where Fee claimed that she could only play a few chords. But just to kind of see that moment where she's strumming the guitar, despite the fact that she, like I said, she didn't really know too much about playing musical instruments. So just to really see her strum the guitar the way she did, just kind of really signified that she could feel her father's spirit. Like, even though he's not around in life anymore, like she could still feel her spirit nearby. And also in the same episode, Molly is actually in the process of recording a song in the studio. And every time that she hears a sort of line from Irene about her music, Molly ends up getting this sort of callback regarding her husband Rick. It's like every line that Irene spurs out, it just sort of reminds Molly of her time when Rick was providing some advice to Molly when he was still alive, when they were both making music together. So it's really kind of haunting her in a way, like she's sort of hallucinating somewhat. Just having to witness someone you knew who passed away, just, getting this sort of callbacks just might seem a little creepy, but at the same time, I kind of feel bad for Molly, just sort of experience what she had to go through and having to, in the years, spend time away making music since her husband's tragic death. So, I mean, it must be really hard just kind of really go through a lot of that, as a widow, especially after witnessing what happened with Rick, and just kind of feel deep down inside that she really missed Rick just as much as probably how much Rick might miss Molly somewhere in the afterlife. So I thought this episode was a really cool way to really kick off the second season. It really laid the groundwork for the many episodes that you will find in season 2. A lot of them were very heartfelt and just filled with a lot of drama and mystery and stuff that's starts to really expand a lot more storylines that kind of progress as the show runs along. So I really enjoyed the first episode, Medium. And this was actually the first and only episode where we get to see Fee's best friend Candy, who only had a small role in this episode, but didn't really amount to anything. I mean, the only time that she would get mentioned is through her chat room that Fee would often go on in her laptop. It was actually interesting to see to see Candy, and I mean, even though she didn't really amount to anything throughout the show, since she was only there for a brief scene, just sort of a flat character that wasn't gonna progress as much in the series, since she was only gonna be mentioned throughout the chat rooms and message forums and whatnot. Other than that, I mean, the first episode of season 2 was, like I said, a really cool way to kick off the season 2. So then we get to the third episode of this particular season, which is entitled Siren. Now, this episode is actually significant for a number of things. First off, we get the introduction of a new character named Carrie, portrayed by Eric Lively, who you may know him as Blake Lively's older brother. This would be around the time where Carrie would make his debut throughout the show, and he actually gets kicked out from college. They did mention Carrie in one episode of I believe it was episode 8 of season 1, where not Jack, but Clue and Jack were in this dressing room, and he did mention, and Clue mentioned something about Carrie and how he was in college and how amazing he is and how cool of a brother he is. Yeah, so Carrie makes his debut in this episode, and this would be sort of a transition period because the actor that portrays Clue, Eric Von Detten, would go on to do various projects, so he would be slowly phased out by the time you get to the 7th episode. So Carrie makes his debut on the show, physical appearance-wise. And also Jewel State guest starred in this episode. She was very young at this time. This was a little before Firefly, and she actually did a Disney Channel show around this time. I believe it was called Flash Forward with Ben Foster, who also was a launching pad for both those actors. So Jewel State also guest starred in this episode as well, and she actually portrays this sort of siren. If you read some of the infamous folklore, like a siren enables their enchanting ability to seduce men and luring them in a trance by performing their own selected music. And popular belief is that sirens have a tendency to seduce their men, only at some point leaving them dead. Carrie is fascinated by Callie. Now, there's also a former tour manager that Molly meets up once again, and she intends on molding Callie into a big-time musician. But there's a bit of a consequence in that Callie kind of feels uncomfortable with what would occur. So the tour manager is intending on exposing her Callie's secret as a siren. As the episode progresses, Callie convinces Carrie to join along the voyage, and really, Carrie's so captivated and enchanted by Callie's voice. So at some point, she plans on running away, and like I said, offers Carrie an opportunity to join along and run away with her. So Fee ends up finding out more about sirens and knowing more about the secret behind Callie and her falling out with the tour manager. They end up agreeing to help her out, and she is actually booked for this sort of concert that she's supposed to take place. And she ends up forgetting her father's instrument. So she goes backstage, Fee and Carrie tag along, but just before they were about to leave, the tour manager spots her. Molly finds out that her former tour manager has no binding contract with Callie, that they were on the brink of signing up with a particular record label, but her name is actually Evelyn, by the way, if anyone's wondering who the name of Molly's former tour manager is. The tour manager actually lied that Callie was on the brink of signing a new record label, and it turns out no such thing occurs. In the end, Carrie wonders if he and Callie were ever going away together, and Callie changes her mind that she's going alone instead, and that's really how the episode ended. Siren was actually a really fun episode. I'm not really sure if that was legitimately Jewel States actually singing the song, which I believe was called Questions. I'm not sure if that was actually her voice or if that was someone else, and maybe she perhaps might have lip synced. I would like to hear like some sort of interview about her tenure on So Weird, even if it was only a one-off episode that she did. Then again, So Weird is a pretty obscure TV show. I mean, I'm sure she's been in a lot of fan conventions, but I'm not 100% positively sure if there was ever any chance that someone might have asked about Jewel Stade and her and talking about how it was like working on this episode or how was it like working on So Weird in general. I really would like to ask her that question if I ever get an opportunity to go to a fan convention and meet her and such. I really like her role on this episode. I really liked her acting there. And Carrie also made his debut, like I discussed. But unfortunately, Carrie kind of feels sort of a bland character. I mean, there was hardly anything I could remember throughout most of the show's run. Like, other than Carrie's aspiration of being a musician, like, he wants to be there with his parents, but like, there's a lot of there's like sort of a secret that he has that he hasn't told his parents. I just don't remember a whole lot of stuff that Carrie did throughout this show. He just kind of seems like a pretty forgettable character. I mean, other than this episode, I can't really recall any other focus episodes that he had. I mean, outside of his debut on the show, which was Siren. But other than that, I mean, Siren was like a very well-produced episode. Definitely one of my favorites of the season. So then we get to the following episode, which is entitled Nightmare. Now, in the beginning of the episode, Jack is actually falling asleep. He is witnessing this sort of dream scenery where he's standing in the middle of a cemetery and he witnesses this young boy in front of him calling him for help. So Jack ends up waking up and he, along with his family, spend the night over at a family's house. And little did he realize that he ends up spotting the same boy from his dream. It just creeped him out all of a sudden the moment that he finds out that this boy from his dream is like standing in up close and in person. As the episode rolls along, he, along with Clue and Fiona, are asleep. They find themselves witnessing the same experience, or same dreaming experience, to be specific. But it turns out that the term, which is actually called convergent dreaming, according to Molly in that episode, where two or more people have the same dream at the same time. So they find out that this boy is having a hard time dealing with his parents, and they're constantly bickering and arguing and possibly on the brink of filing a divorce. Fee, Jack, and Clue volunteer, or at least realize the issue that the boy's going through, and they end up having this convergent dream. And all that's going on, Fee, Jack, and Clue insist on helping the boy try to overcome his fears, and even Fee and Jack also try to overcome their fears as well, where they witness this sort of vision during their dream where Molly and Rick were having this sort of conversation just in the mere moments before Rick ended up taking off and never coming back. So Fee's just kind of weeping. She's like, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And towards the end of the episode, the little boy confronts his two parents arguing in his dream, and he's shouting and he's insisting that the two would stop fighting, and then there's like a tear that just sheds down his face. So Fee, Jack, Clue, and the little boy end up getting back to reality. The boy talks about everything actually it was Clue that explained everything that was going on. The parents insist that the little boy that they'll figure out a way to solve their problems and they'll do whatever they can to make their son happy. So overall, it's a win-win situation. So Nightmare was one of the episodes I remember watching on the Disney Channel when it was on TV. So it was kind of one of those, because I know So Weird didn't really play a whole lot of rerun. I know the show was, by the time, like around 2002, just shortly before they kind of got rid of the Zook Disney branding. that they started to put this show like really late in the morning. But I did remember watching this episode even around the time that So Weird was still running in season 3, like around the time when they started to show it on a day-to-day basis, when I kind of remember watching this episode on TV. It's definitely really sad. Just witnessing the little boy and just, having to experience his parents just having this sort of falling out. And even we get to see a little more with Jack and Fee, and really learning a little more about their parents, and watching what happened, and seeing their mother and father having a conversation in front of them. It kind of really felt I'm trying to look for that word, but I can't really find the words to describe it exactly. But it just kind of really felt really heartfelt, or at least kind of felt very tragic. Like, you really feel sorry for these characters. And that's kind of what I felt with Nightmare. And nevertheless, Nightmare was one of those episodes I remember watching on TV that even looking back now, especially 15 years after the show had ended, it really still holds up for me. And definitely one of those, I would say that for like a lot of the season 2 episodes, because, well, it's like many fans. I mean, this was where the show really started to hit its stride in terms of creative peak, because there's a lot of episodes, especially some of the really like dramatic episodes, really kind of captivate me and having me glued to the edge of my seat. Overall, Nightmare was just definitely a really enjoyable episode overall. Now we get over to the following episode, which is entitled Listen. So this deals with a mother and son operating a farm that may be at risk of bankruptcy. So a festivity is taking place in order to raise money and awareness to maintain their farm. In the process, they also run this sort of bakery store, filled with cupcakes, bread, bagels. And little do they realize that there's a secret ingredient that allows people to communicate telepathically without saying it out loud. So along the way, Fiona stumbles across this boy who can read people's minds, including hers. And while they're going on this little adventure, Fee and Jack, who accompanies Fee, they end up going to this sort of crop circle, and they find out that there's actually a secret wheat ingredient that can be used to read people's thoughts and know what they're gonna say, or what they have in mind. But it's sort of kind of like a psychic. I don't know that they directly mentioned that he was a psychic, but they did mention it was ESP of sorts. While Fee and Jack investigate on the crop circle, the boy ends up finding out their secret, or his secret. So he attempts to scare off Jack and Fee, and it's not too long after where the mother finds out about the boy's secret ability. By the end of the episode, an enchanting voice echoes throughout the field. And when Jack asks Fee what's going on, she explains to them that they insist on listening. Going back to the episode, which I believe it was called Memory. Now, I was very confused at first when I watched this episode as a little kid, because even watching it a second time, it just felt so confusing. Like in the ending, where there's this random voice echoing in the background, just telling them to listen, and even Fiona insisting Jack to do the same. And then the episode ends, and it fades to black with the executive producer, the end credits. I did remember as a kid, it kind of felt pretty vague. But as years go by, as far as researching on the show and trying to understand, what the episode was about, what happens here is that it turns out that this would involve the aliens from the episode Memory. Now, it turns out that these aliens from the season 1 episode Memory would attempt to contact the living world once again. And according to John Cooksey's article from, I believe, 2001, just when the show was already wrapped up in production. So what would have happened is that they would have tried to reach over to Fee and try to provide information regarding their connection to their father, and how the alien would share his or her experience with Fiona, about how it's like to lose someone they loved, and how the aliens and Fee have some things in common, that they have an obstacle in order to overcome. And a good majority of these episodes seem to have a good idea how to leave viewers wondering what happened. Yeah, so it seemed like they were building up into something, but in hindsight, it's a shame that a lot of these plot lines never paid off. It turns out that when you're, like, especially with the characters, like, if they were eating something, like, from the bakery with the breads or the cupcakes, like, they have this sort of telepathic mind reading ability that they could read some people's minds. And even Irene eventually found out Carrie's secret, that he actually got kicked out of college, if I'm not mistaken. Listen was a kind of peculiar episode. Even as a kid, it just kind of felt like, I mean, especially if you're aiming towards a show like at a younger audience, it's like, how could you really understand what is going on here? And for some reason, it took me years to really try to rewatch the episode and start to get a better understanding about what the episode was about. But overall, Listen was it was a key important episode. It would be kind of a disservice if I didn't really talk about this episode overall. Now we get to the sixth episode, which was entitled Mutiny. And the sixth episode of the second season, the gang discovers this driftwood by the ocean. And it actually contains a spirit of a deceased pirate who was known to be harsh to his slaves. So when the tour bus driver Ned retrieves the driftwood from Fee and the gang, his mannerism starts to drastically alter and starts to embrace the spirit of the late pirate, and starts to have this sort of psychological behavior very similar to the pirate, that he's this sort of arrogant dictator bossing Fee, Jack, Clue, and Carrie around. And also in this same episode, this is where Clue receives this mail that it turns out he gets accepted by this college, and he's ready to move out shortly after. Now, episode rolls along. Fee, Jack, along with the Bell brothers, start to learn more about the origin behind the driftwood and figure out what they could do to free Ned from its spell. What will happen is that the gang ends up getting trapped in the bus. Molly and Irene are out somewhere else, so they're unable to make contact with them. So Ned is basically babysitting the four of them. Even though they had them trapped, Fee finds out another method, or at least I believe it was Fee. So they find a way to escape the bus, and they throw the driftwood over far as possible in the ocean. While the driftwood is sinking, Ned is kind of feeling like he's drowning, because that's how the pirate in the flashbacks ended up dying. Was that there was this sort of, I believe there was a rainstorm, if I'm not mistaken. Like, the slaves ended up trapping this pirate, and he couldn't get out. And basically he was drowning, so he ended up dying in the process. And his spirit ends up resting in peace, or at least so it seems. So Ned ends up regaining consciousness once again, starts to become his old self. This would turn out to be Clue's last regular appearance on the show, at least not until season 3. But what happened here is that his actor Eric Von Detten was working on a ABC sitcom which was called Odd Man Out. He successfully auditioned as a lead character, and Odd Man Out only ran for about one season. I actually did a discussion about this show back on my TV's Forgotten Gems and Gold Standard User 924 channel. So I actually went a little more detail about the show overall. So if anyone's interested, I could just post it down, the link down in the description box down below, or you could just type it up on YouTube. It's a pretty obscure show. It was part of the TGIF block. This was really around the time where the block started to be on its last legs in the 1999-2000 fall schedule. Eric Von Detten would eventually return in season 3, so he wouldn't be phased out completely throughout the show. He would still be mentioned as the show progresses. Mutiny was a really fun episode. I really liked the actor that played Ned. I thought he did a really good job. Just really fun stuff. It's like that along with Jack being possessed by Bird Crew. It seems like a lot of the episodes where the characters are being possessed by some spirit. A lot of the episodes really seem to deliver. And we're going to get more into that with the episode Destiny, where a particular character gets the similar treatment. Mutiny was definitely a really enjoyable episode. Just really feeling how, just how concerned Ned is, and to see or to feel like how much he's missing Clue and going away to college, and really showing like how the pirate spirit managed to delve into Ned's subconsciousness. Like, there's still a bit of Ned in him, but even though the pirate was possessing Ned, but you could really tell that it kind of really delved into some of the deeper, kind of like his deeper, darkest fears, if you will. If that makes any sense. Then we get to a filler episode, which doesn't really have I don't really have a whole lot of discussion compared to the previous episodes I've discussed thus far, but it was actually one of the few holiday themed specials that So Weird produced, and this episode was entitled Boo. And this guest starred actor Henry Winkler, who was the showrunner of the show, and you might know him as the Fonz from Happy Days. So it was very interesting to see him on this episode. It sort of kind of like reminds me a bit of Halloween Town of sorts, where you have all these urban legend creatures that's roaming around this small town that's dressed up as Halloween costumes every day. It kind of sort of reminded me of the movie Halloween Town that Disney Channel had produced around this time. They should have done a crossover, especially looking back at it. It just kind of boggles me that they never did the crossover of sorts. They would realize that Fee and the gang would realize that the town citizens are actually creatures of the night, as opposed to being regular civilians that are just going out trick-or-treating just because it's Halloween. The episode, there isn't really a whole lot I want to discuss too much. It doesn't really add too much to the main storyline. This is just kind of more of a, just a traditional holiday special of sorts. I really enjoyed Henry Winkler's performance on the show. It was really cool to see him on there. Yeah, there's just, like I said, not really a whole lot to really talk about. Getting into episode 10, which is entitled UPA, which is actually an acronym for Out of Place Artifact. Now, this would be the 10th episode of the second season, so I'm going to be kind of skipping around a few episodes just to kind of get to the key important moments of the show. So, the gang end up spending the night at the hotel. They end up stumbling across this computer technician named Tad Raxel. So they previously encountered him in the season 1 episode entitled Simplicity. He ends up discovering this sort of out-of-place artifact that contains this cheese wheel with holes that open and close. So he tags Fee, Carrie, and Jack along in their little mission of sorts, or little heist, however you want to put it. They infiltrate the CIA base and in an effort to decipher the wheel and its overall functioning. So just before they could conduct any more research, an alarm sounds off. While they're conducting this research, it turns out that the cheese wheel is actually an out-of-place artifact from the lost city of Atlantis. While the three coordinate a strategy to retrieve the cheese wheel, Tad and Molly agree to go out on a date. So, Fee, Jack, and Clue was already long gone, so it was actually Carrie. So Fee, Jack, and Carrie go back into the base and try to retrieve the cheese wheel once again. But just when they were coming close to successfully losing the CIA agent, he ends up regaining the cheese wheel. And Tad and Molly are on this date, really talking about what they have in common. Even Molly sang a song to Tad, which I believe was called More Than a River, which was actually a really good song. I mean, other than the TV theme song of the show, which was In the Darkness, which was just a good song as well. But I definitely like a lot of the soundtrack from So Weird, especially with More Than a River. So she ends up singing this song to Tad, and then the rest of the gang end up interrupting their date. CIA agent ends up retrieving back the cheese wheel. So by the end of the episodes, the gang end up coming up short in the end, and it seems towards the end of the episode, there's the agents inside this submarine ship of sort. He has the cheese wheel, so it turns out that he may be setting a course to Atlantis, although it wasn't directly stated. But that was really how the episode ended. But yeah, Tad was like a pretty underrated character. I mean, he was only here for simplicity and this episode. I'm a little disappointed this was actually be the last time we would see him in any physical capacity. When he and Molly had their date, I thought that these guys had some chemistry of sorts. Like, both of them tend to experience paranoia, as Tad mentioned in one line during their date. If I'm not mistaken, in the original Season 3 plans, he would have sacrificed himself in an effort to maintain the universal gateway between the living and spirit worlds. So that would have actually been interesting and kind of sad at the same time, that Tad would end up dying at some point in the third season, had they gone with the plan. Even though he was socially awkward at times, I mean, deep inside at the same time, he was a kind-hearted person who appreciated doing what he loved doing, his appreciation of technology. So then we get to the 11th episode after that, which was called Banshee. Banshee, this would be where the Phillips family take a break from touring as they stay over at Molly's grandparents' place. So while they're spending the night over there, Fee ends up overhearing an echo outside of her bedroom, and during a conversation with her mother, she is informed about a mythological spirit which is called a Banshee, and they possess the ability to foretell if a person is actually winding down in health. So every night, the Banshee would, for instance, as this episode tries to take away Fee's grandfather, whose name is Colin. During some investigating one night, Fiona and Jack get separated when Fee comes across this Banshee, convincing her not to take her grandfather away from the family. So with much convincing, however, the Banshee lets the issue slide, leaving Colin's soul intact. Now, this episode kind of terrified me, kind of picturing myself in Fee's shoes, and, you know, just, like, she was pretty, you know, she was willing to take risk when she's confronting some dangerous obstacles, and especially with a lot of the supernatural superstition that's kind of plaguing, that's just kind of everywhere she goes. There's always something weird going on, hence the name of the TV show. And the way she confronted the Banshee was one of her defining moments of the show's run. Especially her tenure on the show. There was actually one line that was taken out of the final product, so to speak. It was basically the same. You can actually download the script on the forum. When I was reading page 29 of the script, Fiona makes a compromise to exchange her life years in an effort to make her grandfather live. So she would go on to elaborate, expressing on how her father was taken away from her, including a moral that she learned that we as people aren't sure how long they have to live. But then it wasn't long before Disney realized how deep it sounded to see a child character make an attempt to give away her life. So therefore, the dialogue was removed from the episode's production subsequently. Also in the same episode, a conflict ensues between Molly and her estranged father as they spent years of lack of communication with one another. I do like how willing Molly defended herself in the conversation, and you know how she spent on the road spending postcards, emails, and doing whatever she could to keep in touch with her parents. But she even wrote a song dedicated to Colin, which was called The Rock, a very Irish-driven bass song. So by the end of the episode, Collie and Molly managed to make their amends as she, Jack, and Fee head back on the road. So Banshee really a very dramatic episode, especially with the music, with The Rock, and like towards the end of the episode where Fee was confronting this Banshee despite the risk that she was taking, and just everything that was going on, her convincing the Banshee not to take away her grandfather's life. There's actually a bit of a foreshadowing, or at least a bit of an Easter egg, where there was a knight armor from the 8th episode of season 1, which was called Strangeling. When I rewatched that episode again, I did not realize that that particular scene was going to mean something down the road, that Jack was actually going to be a knight. So, yeah, there was a bit of an Easter egg, if you will, there that they would have touched upon later on. Yeah, so Banshee just really took my breath away, no pun intended. Everything about this episode really kind of had me glued to the screen. And Banshee was one of those examples of this particular episode of this particular season. Then we get to the following episode, which was called Strange Geometry. So Molly shoots this music video inside of an abandoned building constructed by an architect from long ago. And this would actually be the first appearance of Molly's guitarist Jack Kane, who they were together with Molly's husband Rick, the Phillips Kane band. So Jack Kane, contributes to making the video or the music video with Molly, and all that's going on. They come across this blueprint of a portal linking between the spirit and the living world. Sophie starts to become intrigued by this blueprint, and she's going through this traditional investigation regarding about the possibility of a secret portal linking between, like I said, the spirit and the living world. She pinpoints the coordinates leading to the portal's location, and while she makes it there, she stumbles across the group of soulless humans wandering aimlessly. She meets up with this architect, and Fiona and that particular architect share a conversation with one another. So as a favor, he asks Fee to release him from the spirit world, but Fee looks around at the rest of the people inside, asking if they deserve to be freed as well. So she would soon realize how self-centered the architect is, that he's in it for himself. And even when Fee tries to back down the offer, the architect, like what Burkru did in Will-O-the-Wisp, starts to play this sort of mind games and insisting or asking Fee if there was one particular person that she would like to see come back to life. So hinting the possibility that Fee was willing to bring back her father. But despite that, she ends up smashing the portal with an object. I don't know if it was a lever of sorts, but it was some sort of object, and she smashes the portal. Molly, Jack, and Carrie discover Fee, and they help Fee escape the location, the overall area. It was sort of a dome of sorts. I'm not sure how to describe it exactly, but eventually it comes all piling down, and the rest of the gang escape the area. And just when they make it back in the bus, Molly opens up to Fee that there was actually a secret that she kept to her for so long. And that secret, which is revealed that Rick happened to be a paranormal investigator, much like her daughter Fee was. Fee's just so confused and berates her mother. It's like, how could you keep the secret for so long? And how could you? And she's so devastated by the news. And the episode actually concludes on a tragic note. Because up until this point, Fiona's fascination of the paranormal had been sort of a hobby, which was something that she was so fascinated growing up. And she thought she was, she even claimed that she thought she was different like everyone else. Just the way that Molly just kept that secret from Fee, it kind of broke her heart, if you will. But, I mean, in some ways, Molly, she probably shouldn't have lied to her, but at the same time, she was only 3 years old, and she hardly had any, clear memories of what happened in the events leading up to Rick's untimely tragedy. And Molly already had suffered her loss losing with Rick. It's like, why would she risk losing another important figure in her daughter? She didn't want to witness her daughter go in the same path that her husband did all those years ago. So, out of all the episodes, not just in Season 2, but out of all the episodes I've watched throughout the 65 episodes that So Weird ran, this definitely belongs there in my top 5. I thought the acting was really brilliant, especially with Molly and Fee, and just that little cliffhanger at the end. I was surprised there was no to be continue at the end, because a lot of the So Weird episodes tend to end on a more positive note, but here it just kind of feels like some of the episodes end like even some episodes that were kind of like on a happier note, or episodes that kind of leave with a very vague ending as to what's going to happen next. But here it just kind of felt more like oh my god moment, and sort of like that dramatic, like how could you do this moment, and what's gonna happen after that. Like, are Fee and Molly gonna distance themselves from each other? Are they not gonna talk for a long time? Or are they gonna figure out to solve their problems and such? When it's all said and done, Strange Geometry just really blew me away as a viewer in this episode. Then we have the episode after that, which is entitled Fountain, which would be So Weird's only other holiday theme episode apart from Boo. Now, interesting enough, Fountain was actually supposed to be set before Strange Geometry, because if you watch this episode, it make it seem like Fee and Molly just never had their sort of falling out, didn't seem like it was ever acknowledged. But it turns out that in the production order, that this episode was placed before Strange Geometry. Fee and the family shopping for Christmas presents at a mall. Fiona stumbles across this ice cream parlor where she's transported back in time to her youth. If anyone remembers that Goosebumps episode, or even read the books, which was called Cuckoo Clock of Doom, Fee starts to get younger and younger to a time where she de-ages into an infant. So her mission is to search for the ice cream parlor employee that handed her the ice cream that caused her to go back in time before she's poofed out of existence. But by the end of the episode, they kind of swerved us at the end, where it turns out that Fee had been dreaming this whole time. But we do get a strong glimpse of the relationship between the Phillips and the Bells families as seen during the flashbacks. I still think it could have worked out, like have Fee and Molly like acknowledge there's a conflict that they had in Strange Geometry. I mean, even if Fountain was intended to be placed before Strange Geometry, but I think this episode, despite the fact this is a holiday theme episode, could have been a good way to advance the story arc a little more, with Fee and Molly just having their arguing and a bit of lack of communication of sorts. I mean, other than that, I mean, it just kind of really felt sort of just what it is as a holiday special, just kind of a, just basically take a break from the main story arc. There isn't really a whole lot to say about Found. It's a pretty simple, straightforward episode. Not really much happened here. Thank you all guys for watching the first half of my discussion of So Weird Season 2. Stick around as I will discuss the remaining half of Season 2 on another video. Now, I was originally intended on trying to combine the audio file and to cram all the information into this particular video, but I figured this video would just take a long time for me to edit through Windows Movie Maker, so what I'm going to do instead is split this particular video into part 1 and pick up where I left off with this is going to be So Weird Season 2.1. So the next video will be Season 2.2 as I discuss some of the remaining half of Season 2 episodes. So stick around for that. Hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully I got as much information covered as I can. Like I said, thank you all guys for watching, and stay tuned as I will discuss the second half of So Weird Season 2. So until then, this is the GSTV viewer signing out.